Do you have the blipper? Excellent. Thank you very much. Again, apologies for my late arrival. We're here talking about fintech and innovation, and my late arrival is in part down to some people who decided that lying on a runway in London will stop innovation. I'm sure they have great ideals, but anyway, my apologies. What I wanted to do was spend some time talking to you about our research, our analysis. It's been developed right across the globe. We work with financial services companies, technology providers, and the end customers right across the globe, trying to understand how innovation works, how technology will impact the industry. And it's possibly one of the most exciting times to work in and around this industry. I know you've had some excellent sessions this afternoon talking about some of the technology developments. And at a personal level, there's huge opportunities. There's huge threats, both to us individually and also our organizations. And what we need to try and do, I think, is understand where those threats are, where those opportunities are. What I want to try and do is set in context some of the discussions you'll have had this afternoon. Balance things out on both sides. Because frankly, we're not making a great fist of digital. We're actually making very, very hard work of something that's meant to make our lives, our customers' lives, a lot easier. And I think there's a number of reasons. We don't have enough time this afternoon to go into every single one of them. But if like myself, you may have been watching the Olympics over the previous weeks. And one of the things that jumps out to me from those athletes is their 100% commitment. They are totally committed to the cause. Nothing is going to stop them. And as an industry, I don't know necessarily that we have that 100% commitment. And what it's doing is actually opening up opportunities. If you look at some of the most innovative organizations we're seeing at this moment in time, it's not just, say, from the fintech space. You look at some of the regulators, some of the innovation that's been driven through regulatory change. Some of it is meant, some of it's totally inadvertent. It's just happening because of the positions they're taking. But we need to be 100% committed to these opportunities. Because from a customer point of view, most of these guys are not waking up on a Monday morning yearning for a new banking application, a new solution from us. This isn't a picture of your customers the next time you release an update to your internet banking application or a new mobile banking app. And that's true right across the piece, from retail through corporate. There's not enough engagement from a customer point of view. This is just a reality check. And sometimes the technology gets ahead of us. We really need to pull right back and understand the fundamentals that are driving this space, because not everyone is digital. I know this is almost heresy to say so, but at a very practical level, there's a huge mass of people who are in-betweeners who sit. On the one hand, they may be digital at one part of the day. Then they revert back to an analog behavior. In central London, in the city of London, in some would call the centre of the financial districts in Europe and the world, I have to revert to analog behavior because I can't get even a 3G signal in between the tall buildings. People revert, people move backwards and forwards. And the threat is that we overestimate the opportunity out there. The opportunity is that we tap into this group of individuals who need help, who need persuasion. There's an issue about placing too much technology between ourselves and those customers. We've got some really interesting data from some survey work we've done with retail banking customers. So many of you will be familiar with what Apple have done in the payment space with Apple Pay and the use of Touch ID. And as a piece of technology, it's you might describe it as a thing of beauty. It works. It has changed a lot of the parameters around payments. But you talk to customers and ask them about their trust levels in institutions, and you get some very interesting data back. If you talk to retail customers and ask them their level of trust in an organization that relies on something like Touch ID or something similar from Samsung to authenticate those customers, you get relatively high proportions of customers who will trust that institution. As soon as you turn the question around though and say, if the bank owned that authentication system themselves, if they were not relying on somebody like Apple or Samsung, you get a significant uplift, between 10 and 20% uplift in trust in that organization. Now that's a very subtle message, but one of the concerns we have is that we are simply pushing too much technology out there, and in doing so, we're pushing customers away. We're pushing them out to our competitors. Now let me be clear, I'm not saying that technology is a bad thing, absolutely not. What I am saying is, though, we have to understand what we're doing. And as we put more technology out there, the fact that a customer is checking their balance on their mobile banking app 30, 40, 50 times a month, which I've lost count of the number of times I've seen that as one of the critical success factors for our app. They're not talking to you. You've just said to them, you've made it easier for them to check the balance, but it hasn't deepened the relationship. And then in terms of the fragmentation of customers, I think this is one of the biggest challenges we see in and around this space. If we try to focus on a customer base that historically wanted to engage with institutions in 3, 4, 5 different ways, now they want to engage in 105 different ways. At an institutional level, we have to start making decisions about whether those are customers we want, whether we can actually afford to carry on engaging. If we do want to continue engaging with the wider customer base, we have to make some very fundamental decisions. We have to absolutely commit to that digital transformation that I was talking about. We've also got some significant innovation hotspots within this space. And what I want to do is spend some time actually going through these hotspots and trying to dive down in a greater level of granularity into each of these areas. I think the use of data and how data is monetized and utilized is an area where we've got huge opportunity within the industry. It's not an area at the moment where we're really seeing huge moves forward. So there's a lot of talk about analytics and using analytics to better understand a customer. But again, the vast majority of outputs we see from the industry is about using analytics to sort of sell the customer something new, the next best deal for the customer. And actually, we need to use data to fundamentally transform a lot of our businesses. We start thinking as data experts rather than data custodians. As institutions, we still tend to think about us, we hold data, we protect it. We spend a huge amount of time and effort doing that. And reality, we don't actually stand any chance of effectively monetizing it moving forward. In terms of the possibly the biggest impact we see in and around the industry at this moment in time, the concept of open banking and the use of APIs. So the use of APIs is pretty standard within the digital industry, the ability to hand data, hand information off to a third party, very seamlessly allow partners to work with each other and engage and disengage quickly and efficiently. But particularly within the European market, as we move to the revised Payment Service Directive, PSD2, as most people know it, and the drive that will take us towards in terms of customers being able to aggregate accounts. They can have a single standard bank account, and all their other account holdings, they can ask that bank to aggregate the data down to a single dashboard, a single view. That's fundamentally transformational for an industry. That sort of change, it is scary nightmare stuff. If you're a chief executive, if you're a senior executive at any bank, your institution becoming an absolute total commodity at the hands of another bank, an aggregator, whoever else it might be. That's killing a bank. That's not just simply losing 5-10% of your customers. There is something of an obsession with fintech, positive obsession to an extent, but I think certainly that the view we have is that the gloss is starting to come off. If we go back and look at some of the data from earlier on this year, if you look at the first 4 months of this year in terms of investments around the fintech space, we're up into the multi-billions of US dollars investment. But then you talk to the folks involved in many of those deals, and they're becoming incredibly cautious in terms of the way they're investing in and around that space. It's to a certain extent, when you look at this was the savior of the financial services industry. And now we're seeing increasing situations where institutions have been working with fintechs for a period of time, and now they're coming back and saying, well, where's the money? Show me the money. What's the benefit around this? Now again, let me be clear, I am not saying that fintechs and all they bring to the party are bad. I'm absolutely not saying that. What I am saying is we're going through, well, we're past the honeymoon period. If you know the classic Gartner hype cycles, we're past the peak of inflated expectation and we're plummeting into the trough of disillusionment. We need to be very selective, very careful around where we're making our investments in and around this space. Increasingly, we're seeing fintechs which, on the surface, they're dressed in jeans and t-shirts, so that's worth 5 million in terms of their valuation. But when you dig a little deeper and look at the core proposition, we're really starting to struggle. You can't actually rationalize why would a customer want it. My previous slide, I talked about the fundamentals of customers understanding what they actually want. And with way too many of the fintech solutions we're seeing out there in the space at the moment, they're not addressing a defined customer need. And certainly many of them are still struggling in terms of sustainable revenue streams moving forward. I think there's some opportunities in this space, though. It's not all doom and gloom. As we see the regulatory burden really bearing down on financial services companies to an increasing extent, any technology that can help in and around this space is certainly going to develop, and we're starting to see what were embers a while back now really lighting up in terms of the intensity around the whole RegTech space and how two guys in a back bedroom somewhere can help a large financial services organization address some of the challenges the regulators bringing to bear. Similarly with hackathons, I think there's some positives here, there's some negatives. The gloss around hackathons and accelerators is coming off. It's waning. I worked with one client a couple of months ago who shipped his entire executive team over from the Gulf to run a hackathon one weekend in London. And it was just a marketing exercise from their point of view. It achieved the objective, which was to engage their executive team with digital technology, but in terms of delivering sustainable results, it was way off the mark. And I think increasingly we're going to start to see banks reining in the very public work they're doing around hackathons, some of the more public approaches, diverting some of that investment into internal accelerators, which we won't see so much of that in the public domain. I think there's some real opportunities in specific technologies, things like biometrics. I touched on that earlier on when I was talking about Apple Pay. But if you think about the strength and the core principles around digital technology, if you can strongly authenticate a customer, if you can absolutely guarantee their identity, then you can do a whole host of different things that certainly compared to what you're able to do in an analog space. If If you go back 15, 20 years, what did banks do? They guaranteed a customer's identity. They would notarize a customer's identity. That was one of the key attributes that a bank, a financial services company, brought to the table. And it's areas like biometrics. If we devolve that to third parties, if we step away from that and let the Apples or the Samsungs or the other third-party providers step into that vacuum, we will count the cost as an industry. I think the good news is this is certainly an area where, in the work we're undertaking with clients across the globe, there's a huge increase in investment going into this space, not just biometrics, but broadly around customer authentication and verification. And that's an area we've been calling on institutions to invest heavily in for a number of years, because it's moving out of the back office. It's moving away from a pure security piece into a much more robust customer-facing application that can start to differentiate organizations. And we shouldn't have to let Apple or somebody else like that show us how to do that. I'm acutely aware, I've just followed a session on blockchain, and I'm talking here about blockchain hype. I think blockchain has huge opportunities around this space. It's an area where undoubtedly that there will be massive leaps forward. But we have to sense check what we can and can't do. From Gartner's view, we're still at least 5 years away from blockchain, distributed ledger, whatever you want to call it, any degree of maturity in and around that space. So we're going to see a lot of research and development, which is to be encouraged, and we would certainly endorse that. But I think there's a lot of hype, a lot of misinformation in and around the environment at the moment that could do damage to the core technology. We need to be sensible about the way we manage this. We need to be sensible about understanding what it can do, and more practically what it cannot do, at least until it reaches some degree of maturity. We're also making it more difficult for ourselves in a number of other areas. We're still struggling in terms of our structure and operations. So we're focusing on fintechs, we're focusing on lots of technology investments, but actually some of the biggest hurdles to real innovation we see in the industry are just the way we structure ourselves at an organizational level, the way we remunerate people, the way we place people together in teams, the way we structure our operations. A lot of that built on years of tradition and history. Right at the core of the banks, if you look at most of the institutions across the globe, look at their cost-income ratios, look at many of the legacy platforms they're still running on. We're still way off beam compared to some of the other new neobanks, some of the new startup institutions. And actually, we need to be directing or redirecting more of our innovation focus towards driving down that cost base to a sustainable level, towards looking at our existing legacy platforms and moving them to a state where we will be able to innovate. Otherwise, we're simply laying cost on cost on cost. I think if you look at something like, even something as obvious as mobile banking, and then look at the ROI for that for most financial institutions, it's negative. We haven't cut much on the back of mobile banking. We still maintain our internet banking systems. Maybe we shut a few branches because it's given us the opportunity to. But the fundamentals of our cost base have still not been addressed. Culture and mindset, again, these are not technology issues, but they strike right to the heart of how we're going to innovate in our organization. If we don't have a culture that allows people to make mistakes, that allows people to test and learn, then we're never going to be able to move our institutions forward. It doesn't matter what the technology can do, we just will not have the people to do it. And I've spent too much time in executive meetings with banks talking about great ideas. We'll spend the whole day talking about how the bank's going to reinvigorate itself. And you step out of the room and you know nothing's going to change. And let me say, if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't change it either. because I would value my job. I would value the security. So I'm not preaching here, I'm simply articulating what we're seeing. I think we need new ways of measuring return on investment. If we use old ways of measuring financial contribution, we're going to continue to ignore opportunities and dive down rat holes in terms of our investment strategies moving forward. We can't use old ways of measuring output to measure the impact of digital technology. We have to be much more innovative in the way we approach that. And we're really not using technology in the way it's intended. If you think about some of the biggest developments around social networking and just the rollout of mobile devices in the first point, they were about connecting people, getting people to interact, talk, communicate, drive empathy. We don't really think about that technology as financial services company. It's a way of trying to cut cost or getting the customer to do a bit of self-service. It's not a way of engaging more deeply with the customer. Whether it's in the retail space, corporate investment services, we look upon the technology as this hard lump of metal. And right at the core of what we're doing, some of the fundamentals around our business models, we need to look at those and just decide, are we in the business of simply taking deposits, making payments, lending money, managing risk? Are those just the core fundamentals, or are we going to really rip the rule book up? We're going through a session in Ghana. Every year at our symposium, we run a series of innovation awards. And we're going through some of the shortlisting at the moment. And I would say I've been inspired by some of the approaches there. There are increasing numbers of organizations who are starting to take the rule book and rip it up. Maybe only in parts of their organization, but they're gaining that momentum. But it's going to be fundamental to us moving forward. And then aspects like the Internet of Things, algorithmic business. I think we're in a space here where the ability to leverage technology, whether it's the massive sensors, the intelligent machines that we're going to see in this space. This isn't about your refrigerator reordering your milk. This is about changing supply chain. This is about fundamentally re-engineering the way we approach many of our products and services. I think if we look upon this as a threat or an opportunity, I guess it depends which side of the lens you look at it through. But from our point of view, I think there's 4 areas we'd encourage everybody to focus on. The hype around a lot of technologies, if we can just overcome that, look through the hype and understand fundamentally what this can do for a customer, what it can do for our own organization, then we're much better placed to use that technology effectively and, as importantly, manage expectation. Manage expectation upwards within our organization about what it can actually achieve. That cultural issue, the ability, the permission, if you like, to try things in a different way and maybe not deliver the returns that we always thought traditionally we had to do in a bank. Actually focusing down on real fundamental problems. Technology is wonderful in its own right, but if it doesn't solve a problem, nobody's going to pay for it. And that's right at the core of what we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about innovation, when we're thinking about fintechs. And lastly, back to what banks are about. Banks, financial services companies are fundamentally built on trust. Networks are built on trust. Between banks, between customers. It's one of the biggest opportunities we have is to rebuild the trust. Using technology to enable us to talk to our customers and say, look, hey, we'll help you, we'll protect you. We'll explain this to you. We'll offer products that actually help move you forward. I think if we can address those 4 areas, then we're in a fundamentally better place to really take advantage of fintech innovation in this space.